It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. I'm John Schmeelk, joined by Matt Citak. The number for you is 201-939-4513. Hashtag Giants Chat. We'll take your calls reviewing the Giants 2024 NFL Draft. Folks, if you want my take on all the picks, you can just go back. It's on the Giants Huddle podcast feed, or you can just go to Giants.com, the Giants YouTube page, our 3 days of live draft shows. Go check them out, and you'll get my take on most of the picks. So I'm going to spend most of the start of today's show to get Matt's take, because we have not heard from Matt since the Giants completed their entire draft, really. So you're with me on Thursday before we started, Matt, but you have not been with me since. So just give me your overarching thoughts on the class here. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, I am encouraged by the draft class. I think Joe Shane, the whole front office, coaching staff did a great job of meeting needs with value. I mean, there's an argument that could be made that all 6 draft picks were at positions of at least somewhat need for the Giants. Obviously, Malik Neighbors, a number 1 receiver, that was one of the biggest needs, if not the biggest. They got a potential starting safety in Tyler Nubin, potential starting slot cornerback in Phillips. They got insurance at the tight end position in Theo Johnson. Potentially my favorite pick of the draft is the 5th-round pick, Tyrone Tracy. I think there is a lot to be very excited about with him. You know, he played running back this past season. It was the first time he played running back. Prior to that, he had 4 years at Iowa playing wide receiver and 1 year at Purdue playing wide receiver.
He had some carries in his first year at Purdue, but he was still primarily a wide out.
A handful of carries, but most of his action was coming at the wide receiver position. This past year was the first time he played extensively at running back, and he looked great. Averaged almost 6.5 yards per carry, looked explosive, was also a big factor in the return game. I think he was named, I want to say either second team All Big Ten or third team All Big Ten as a return specialist and also as a running back, or got some votes for the All Big Ten team at running back. So I think there's just some untapped potential there with Tracy at both the running back position and kick returner. And then same goes for the 6th-round pick, Darius Muasau. The Giants needed a little more depth at the linebacker position, and I think he could also contribute almost right away on special teams. So he finished his collegiate career at UCLA, but began it at Hawaii, where his special teams coordinator was Michael Gobriel, who is now the Giants special teams coordinator. So Gobriel clearly knows what he can get out of this linebacker, at least on special teams. And, a 6th-round pick, I don't think you'd expect him to, jump into the starting lineup right away, but I think he offers some good depth at a position where they needed some more bodies and guys to potentially grow into that room as a whole. So overall, I'm definitely encouraged. I mean, I feel like a lot of, our callers are going to call in and want to talk about one position in particular that the Giants did not address during the draft.
Running back? No.
Maybe one of those. No, it's obviously quarterback. But look, we've all seen the reports out there about, reported interest the Giants had in moving up to try to get a quarterback. It didn't work out. At the number 6 pick, they decided to take the best player on their board instead of forcing a pick at a certain position. Like, they could have taken J.J. McCarthy. I don't think a lot of people would have faulted the Giants for taking McCarthy or Michael Penix, but they went with the top player on their board. And when you're building a team, it's not all about building the team to just contend that upcoming season. It's about building a great core of players that you hope to be around for the next 5 to 10 years, if not more. And drafting Malik Neighbors at 6 overall, I think you got one of the best, if not the best, playmakers in the entire draft, and someone that's going to bring a new dynamic to the offense that the Giants haven't seen, honestly, since Odell Beckham left.
Yeah, I was asked on a radio hit up in Syracuse this morning, if the Giants did not have such a big need at wide receiver and playmaker and Neighbors, would they have then taken McCarthy? And my answer was, or Penix. And I said, no, probably not. Because if they truly believed in one of those two guys at such an important position, they would have just picked them at 6.
Yeah.
So that's a matter of the evaluation of those players. Now we'll find out if they're right about the evaluation of those players. We'll all find out, who's right and who's wrong about all these guys. Because as go down to the first round, guys, people are all thrilled. Every team thinks they got better today. It's not going to work out for every team and every pick.
No.
It's just the way the NFL is. It's not how it works. And some of these guys are going to be good. Some of these guys are going to bust. Some of it's going to be the player's fault. Some of it's going to be the team's fault for not putting the players in the right situation. That's just the way it goes. So I thought it was a good question that I got, and that's my honest thought on why. The last 2 picks, I didn't have a chance to talk about those much because we had wrapped our live shows before they picked Tracy and Muasau. So I'll work backwards. Muasau first. I was watching him this morning. I did not watch him leading up to the draft. He was not one of my 150 or so that I got to. And running the hit guy, smaller frame, 230, very frantic in a good way. And I say frantic because I just think he's moving all the time. He's got a good motor. He looks like a really good special teams player when you watch him on defense. He wasn't asked to cover a ton. They used him on blitzes a lot, where he actually did a good job. Whenever he was one-on-one with the running back, he tended to win that matchup, what you want to see out of a blitzer. If you're a linebacker, you have to be able to beat those running backs one-on-one if they try to pick up your blitz. Good athlete, quick, side to side. Good acceleration. I did not have a chance to look at his 40 time, but my guess is that his 40 time is not all. What was it, 4.48? Is that what you're looking at right there? Or is that Tracy?
Oh, no, this is Tracy.
I'll have to look at Muasau. So I did not have a chance to look that up. I'll look it up right now. But he's a guy that I thought had some traits that I liked as a linebacker. High effort guy, ran around a lot, and to your point, we'll start on special teams. We'll see eventually he can try to compete with Micah McFadden and the other linebackers to try to get some playing time in their defensive formations. As for
4.7.
4.7.
From
yeah.
Muasau.
So not a great top speed, but if you look, 36.5 broad is excellent. And a 1.59, 10-yard split on the 40 is actually pretty good too. So acceleration, explosiveness, but maybe not that high-end top speed. But 4.7 for a linebacker is actually not terrible. That's fine. So I'm going to bring up his RAS. I'm curious to see what it's at in terms of when they put all those things into their little cauldron and what comes up. He came out like a 5.73, which is 57th percentile. That's not bad. And again, the size, just 5'11", just under 6 foot, 225 pounds at the combine. So those are numbers you look at and you're like, all right, that's why he's sitting there available for you in the 6th round. So you hope he can develop into something that you like to see. But again, I like the activity and I like that short area quickness that we saw on tape. As for Tyrone Tracy, he's a project. And I think even when you watch him on tape, Matt, he looks like a guy that hasn't played running back. He kind of just is running really hard. He bounces off guys. He breaks tackles. You see the underlying athleticism. You see the explosiveness. You see the characteristics of a guy that can be a good running back, but he needs to learn how to play the position a little bit more in the pros because, to your point, while he was recruited as a running back, he immediately got moved to wide receiver. So he's a guy that has to learn the ins and outs and nuances of that position. And I think, to your point, he's going to compete in the return game right away. I could see them being week 1, Tyrone Tracy's your kick returner. That would not surprise me one iota. He's got the overall traits to do it. And I think you just have to see when he's ready to get on the field. Maybe as a third down back. He's obviously receiver background. He can catch the football. And how he competes with Eric Gray and Devin Singletary in that running back room.
Yeah, exactly. And, obviously Tyrone Tracy has not played a single down in the NFL yet, so I don't want to be putting out any comparisons, but just looking at how he tested at the combine, and obviously we both mentioned his wide receiver background. If you look at his numbers, though, his testing in Indianapolis, they are eerily similar to Deebo Samuel's numbers. I saw someone over the weekend on Saturday posted the Giants just got, a Deebo Samuel light in Tyrone Tracy. And at first I just, scoffed at that because obviously Deebo is amazing. But looking at their numbers, like they ran the same exact 40-yard dash, 0.05 difference in 10-yard split, verticals almost exactly the same, broad jump within 2 inches of each other. Like, at least physically, Tyrone Tracy is built like Deebo Samuel.
What did Deebo weigh in at the combine?
214.
All right, it's only 5 pounds heavier too. That's not bad.
Same height.
Yeah, look, he was 978 on his RAS score, Tyrone Tracy. So that's the 97th percentile in terms of overall running back athleticism. His 3-cone and short shuttle were maybe the most impressive of all his numbers. A 406 short shuttle, 681 3-cone, both those in the 98th percentile. His jumps were both very good. So, yeah, he's got all the athleticism you want, and it's just a matter if he can, continue to learn how to play the position. He'll be coached up here, and we'll see how quickly the Giants can get him on the field offensively. And again, I think return game wise, if I had to guess who the Giants returner is week 1 on kickoffs, I would guess him right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, he was, again, all conference last year in kick return. He averaged just over 25 yards per kick return, scored a touchdown.
Which is weird because it really is different, though. Because like college uses the old kickoff, right? And
Yeah.
I think it'll be an adjustment for him and everybody else to figure out what the best way is to handle, how fast do you go, how patient are you. I think it's really a whole new play that these guys have to learn from scratch. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I mean, I think this year more so than ever, the preseason is going to be very important, at the very least for the special teams units, because it's going to be the first time that all of these players get to, practice with or play with the new league rules in an actual game situation. Like, you can practice all you want, at your facility, special teams unit versus your own special teams unit, but until you're out on the field going up against another team, you don't truly get a feel of these new rules. So preseason is going to be very important, and I agree with you. At least as of right now, I would think Tyrone Tracy has a very good chance at being the Giants kick returner. Obviously, there are a few other guys who were brought in this offseason in particular that I think will definitely be in the running. I mean, I think we spoke about it last week or 2 weeks ago. Isaiah McKenzie, he will be up there. Turbo Miller, Dante Miller, you'd have to think he would be in the running. Of course, Gunnar Olszewski was re-signed. So the Giants are going to have some options in the kick return game. I'm just, in particular, intrigued by Tyrone Tracy. His athleticism really jumps out.
Yep, I agree. 201-939-4513. Folks, I mentioned all our live draft shows are up on the Giants Huddle podcast feed, so go subscribe to the Giants Huddle podcast. We're going to have a full draft review with Jeff Risdon later in the week. We'll have a couple more guests over the next few weeks reviewing this draft class before we transition into OTAs and what's going on with this roster and team here. So stay tuned to the Giants Huddle podcast for all of that. And we'll have a couple more episodes of draft season. Our full draft review is up there right now. And then we're going to have our look at the 2025 hitting next week. So Tony Pauline and I in draft season, you can find both those podcasts on Giants.com/podcast, the Giants app, or just search for either one on your favorite podcast platform and hit that subscribe button. If you're on Apple Podcasts, leave that 5-star positive review as we continue to move ahead here. That'll help us out if you leave that 5-star review as we try to get more eyes on our podcast. All right, let's lead it off with Nick in Virginia today. You're on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Hi, Nick.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
We're great.
Good.
Good. I just want to talk. So there's a point I want to make. The draft I thought went well. I like what Shane's been doing the last couple of years. It seems like he's drafting well for need. And then also, like last year when you look, there was the 3 guys they ended up getting, with Banks, Schmitz, and then Hyatt. I think there were mocks that had those guys going to them in the first round. And they got them all in the first 3 rounds. And I think Shane, again, he's doing a good job of kind of assessing need and basing and kind of getting best player available. But the point I wanted to make is I feel like this Daniel Jones contract, all these Twitter GMs and everybody that comments on it, it's like they don't really understand the way that it bothers me that people think like it's this awful contract. And when you look at the numbers, it's really not. And I think that Joe Shane built the contract the way that he did because he kind of put that prove it component in there still, right? So like $82 million is guaranteed of the $160. Everybody in the media, every time they reference the contract, fans, it's $40 million, you're paying them all this money. When you break it down, the money spread out over 3 years, it's $27 million average annual value over 3 years. So it's not, if you look at a second contract for any quarterback in the league, nobody's getting that little.
That isn't including
that.
Now, in fairness, Nick, that isn't including the signing bonus, though.
It does not include the signing bonus?
No, because if you look at the signing bonus over 3 years, it's about 30. It's about 37 or 38 per year.
Okay.
And then that fourth year is very inflated, which kind of brings that number up to about 40 average annual value. I will double check it based on what's on over the cap. But I remember when the contract first got signed, I went through it, and I think it averaged out to about 30. If you include, and again, this was before they did do one mini restructure on it last year, so that changed the numbers a little bit. But I believe that it came out to a 3-year deal at about $37.5 million a year.
Okay, so that's more than I thought, but at the same time, like, it's still, I think, a little bit, when you look at what quarterbacks were getting after the year he came off of, I don't think that's terrible. And again, Giants fans, if you like the team and you want them to succeed, you should want to see him get all of that money, because then that means the team is winning and doing well. And the fact that they didn't reach for a quarterback in the draft, I was honestly sweating that. I was like, are they going to reach for McCarthy? Then they took Neighbors, which I was super pumped about. So I just think, like, Shane is committed to building this the right way. As great as it would be to be able to look into a crystal ball and find the next Patrick Mahomes or C.J. Stroud, it's just not possible with every time. And I think people that just want to go quarterback just to take a quarterback, and then if that quarterback doesn't pan out, then they're just going to be complaining that they got the wrong quarterback. It's just like, I have to listen to Paulie Dots and stay off of Twitter, because that's just what all they do is complain about. But yeah, I think, like, you know, he's got the weapons now. Let's see if the line, and that's the thing too. Everyone's talking about, we didn't go O-line. Well, I think they did it in free agency, but I think what people are overlooking is Carmen Bracillo's hire. Like, this guy, we don't need the line to be top 5. Daniel Jones threw 24 touchdowns in 2019 with a line that was ranked 19th in the league. We've been bottom 3, bottom 4 ever since then. Like, if we could just be middle of the road, and I think Bracillo, coming from the coaching tree that he's coming from that you guys have referenced, and with the guys that they've brought in, if we can just be middle of the pack, just give a little bit of time, I think that this team can do some special things with the weapons that they've brought in. That's all I wanted to say. I'll take it off the air. Thanks, guys.
No, appreciate the call, man.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. We'll start with the last point, the O-line. I saw a lot of this on Twitter over the weekend as well, and yesterday. You have to keep in mind, the Giants spent most of their free agency resources on the offensive line. Of course, they went out and traded for Brian Burns and then signed to do a big extension. But outside of that, John Runyon, Jermaine Illuminor, even Aaron Stinney, Austin Schlottman, Matt Nelson, like, they went out and signed a lot of offensive linemen. Some to start, some to, compete for the backup spots, but they put a lot of resources towards the offensive line. So it didn't shock me that they did not use one of their 6 picks on the O-line, considering there were other positions that needed to be addressed. So just wanted to say that on that point. In terms of the quarterback, I mean, I said it before, you can't reach for a quarterback. It doesn't matter. Like, if you feel conviction for a guy, it doesn't matter where you're picking in the first round, you take him. You mentioned this before. So if Joe Shane felt that conviction and felt confident that J.J. McCarthy could be, the next franchise quarterback for 10 to 15 years, or Michael Penix or Bo Nix, he would have drafted him. Like, Joe Shane made it clear that Daniel Jones, the contract that Daniel Jones got last year, was not going to preclude them from picking a quarterback this year if they thought they were going to get their guy. And again, there are the reports out there that they attempted to move up to try to get someone, and the media is saying that person was Drake May. So, if those reports are true, then clearly Joe, Dabes, they had the conviction about him. But it takes 2 to tango. If the other team isn't willing to trade, at least be somewhat reasonable on the trade front, then what is he supposed to do? Like,
and again, I'll say this again. I wasn't comfortable saying this before the draft, as it was told to me in confidence. But another guy that I know that covers the league pretty closely told me that from one of those teams in that quarterback alley, the Patriots are asking for 3 ones and a Pro Bowl player.
Which, with the 6th overall pick, like, that's crazy.
Again, I don't know if that's what the ask for the Giants was, but that's what they had asked for from a different team.
Yeah, I mean, even if it was a little bit less than that, that's still a crazy high price to pay to move up 3 spots.
Yep.
It was clear that New England did not want to move out from that spot. And I saw one report over the weekend that said one of the reasons why New England was, so adamant about staying at 3 and selecting Drake May was because the Giants with Brian Daboll, and then the Minnesota Vikings with Kevin O'Connell. Because those two teams, those two coaches in particular, wanted to move up for Drake May, the Patriots were like, if those two guys want him so bad, this kid must be really good. We're going to take him ourselves. So, like, I know for months a lot of Giants fans have been screaming, we need to take a quarterback, we need to take a quarterback. Well, they tried. It takes two people to tango. So I just really don't know what some Giants fans would have wanted Joe Shane to do in that situation.
Well, I get into this argument a lot with people. What happens every year in the draft, like, I can't believe the Giants didn't get this player. They should have traded up to get him. I go, well, maybe the other team didn't want to trade back to get that player. And again, we don't know exactly how hard the Giants tried for anything. We're just going based on what the multiple reports from multiple different reporters on different networks were saying that, well, we understand they're just reports, but they're out there. So it is what it is. And, that's why the draft is the draft. You pick where you slot, and sometimes the player you want is there and sometimes he's not. And you do the best you can based on where the players go. So I did the quick math here, and I'm going to do my little calculation again. This is based on public available contract information that I have no idea is true or not, but I did my quick math, and that's about what it comes out to. So that's where we're at. 201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. Let's go back to the phones and say what's up to James in Georgia. James, you're next on Big Blue Kickoff Live. What's up, man?
What's going on, guys?
We're good.
How you doing, James?
I'm actually about to head to day shift here, like next week sometime, so probably won't hear from me as often. I know that probably breaks Sal's heart, but
I'm dying inside, James.
That's right. I mean, we're having a good series over there with the Knicks, John. I've been tweeting with you, while the game's been going on and stuff.
Yep.
But
it's been fun.
I just called because I've been calling during the draft, and they did a good job. I like the picks. The quarterback situation, like Shane says, it is what it is. It didn't work out for all the reports that were out there. The Giants tried to give them a good haul, but like I said, they wanted to add in a piece of cake too. They wanted to add in Dexter Lawrence as well, and we didn't have the Pro Bowl. We wasn't going to give up a Pro Bowl player. So it's not like I think they offered them 647. Like there were reports out there that they all offered them a boatload, and they just didn't take it because they were still looking for more. And we're not setting our franchise back, another 10 years just for one player. That you got to have a draft to be able to build a team. So I was called to ask just with they haven't really put out. I've only seen on Twitter, the undrafted free agents that's been coming in.
Yeah, just a heads up, guys. You guys gonna want to ask about these guys. We cannot talk about undrafted free agents until the team releases the name. So I can't give you anything on that right now.
All right. Well, then, basically, I kind of figured you was going to go that way. So, who do you like on looking at the roster as it stands? What type of player, either body type of player, in all positions, just whatever positions, do you think we are lacking or need the most help?
Thank you, James.
Appreciate you guys, Matt, John. Talk to you next time.
Appreciate it, dude.
Thanks, James.
Look, just in the undrafted free agent category in general here, guys, this is not a deal where you're looking for positions of need. You're just looking for guys that you think can make it, no matter what position they're at. Same thing when you're picking in the 6th and 7th round. Even if it's not a position of need, if you have a guy with a draftable grade on your board, that's when you pick that guy. Like, you can't get picky at that point and try to aim for need and stuff like that. So that's just the way I look at it, to be totally honest with you. And in terms of overall needs, look, I still think you can, and I said this during the draft, if they wanted to pick 2 corners, I would have been fine with that. So I think you can still add corners here, Matt. I think you could add running backs to the room still in some way, shape, or form. You want to add, they got plenty of tight ends here now. They didn't seem to indicate that there was a need for another quarterback. There'll be here guys trying out, based on what Brian Dable said on rookie tryout day and rookie minicamp weekend. But other than that, there's not maybe defensive tackle, 3 technique. That's a spot maybe where maybe you could add another piece. I know people keep saying offensive line, but like the team I went through it, we're like they're 10 or 11 deep there with like veterans. Like it's going to be tough for enough undrafted free agent to come in here and make the team. I mean, you got to just hope to get them on the practice squad. So you can try to do that, but that is a pretty full boat right now.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the thing that's a little more interesting to sort of keep an eye out on is if the Giants go out at this point and sign any veteran free agents. I mean, we touched on this last week. Now, free agent signings no longer count towards the compensatory pick formula.
Did that start today?
Or it's sometime
maybe
in the
next week, maybe, or
it's
something like
sometime
that?
in the next, in
Yes.
the coming days. So that is what I'm more interested to see. Especially if the Giants went and drafted Theo Johnson in the 4th round. It seems like as insurance in case Darren Waller decides to retire. Everyone is still waiting to hear about that, what Darren decides. But let's say he does go out and retire, that's going to clear another $6-7 million in cap space. And then if you also think about, they still have the ability, if they choose to restructure guys like Bobby Okereke or Andrew Thomas. I think those would be the next 2 most likely guys to restructure their deals.
4 p.m. today, by the way.
4 p.m. today.
Is what I'm seeing on SI.com.
Okay, so with potential cap space from Waller, potential restructures, the Giants could have the cap space to go out and make some actual meaningful signings. And again, if guys are still, if veterans are still sitting as free agents at this point, chances are they're not locking in those long-term huge extensions that they probably would have hoped for. So now is the time. It's a little bit of like bargain bin shopping, but now's the time you can get some very quality starting caliber players for inexpensive 1-year deals. And that is what I want to see if, the cornerback position, the second outside cornerback spot opposite Deonte Banks, as of right now, it seems like it would be a competition between several younger players on the roster, and that could be what the Giants, the front office, decide they want to do heading into training camp. But there are still a couple of very experienced veteran corners out there that they could decide to sign to a 1-year deal to put out there opposite Deonte Banks. And
there are some veterans, by the way, Xavier Howard, J.C. Jackson, Adoree Jackson's still out there, Stephen Gilmore's out there.
Steven Nelson.
Steven Nelson's out there. Those are the big veteran guys that I would bring up there in terms of guys that are available.
Yeah, and that's just at the cornerback position. I mean, there's an argument to be made that they could still add, another edge rusher to the group because you can never have too much depth, especially at that position. I've seen this name float around, someone like Bud Dupree, who has experience with Shea Bowen from Tennessee, still available as a free agent. Defensive tackles, I would think more towards the defense would be where I would look in terms of potential veteran additions. And again, this is all assuming that more cap space is cleared, whether it's through a potential Darren Waller retirement or restructures, which none of that could end up happening. So I'm not saying that it's for sure going to happen, but I think there are some very, very talented and solid veteran defensive players still available that the Giants, once we get past 4 o'clock, could look to add and bring into the mix, if nothing more than having good depth at some important positions.
And again, based on over the cap, the Giants right now could be netting a 7th-round pick. They're kind of right on the cusp of that. So I'm not sure this window opening impacts them that much. I don't think a 7th-round pick would kind of, there are other teams out there like the Ravens have a bunch of picks coming their way. Dallas has a bunch of picks coming their way. There are a couple other teams. Fewer, though, than usual. There's actually going to be fewer compensatory picks in next year's draft. I looked through that over the weekend than there usually are. I think because of the unexpected rise in the salary cap, so many teams went out there and signed more free agents.
Yep,
so the
makes
number
sense.
of the compensatory picks next year are going to be down just a little bit. 201-939-4513. George in Florida, you're up next. Hey, George.
Thanks for taking my call, John and Matt.
What's up,
John? I'm kind of surprised to see you there after putting in so many hours over the weekend, but I appreciate that you are.
You will probably not hear me on BBK until the end of the week at the earliest. So I will be taking a little break after today, but I want to do the kind of recap of the whole draft with Matt here before I stepped away for a couple of days.
I don't blame you. I called in last week when you were doing that trade possibilities show.
Yeah.
And my comment was I wanted to see the Giants stay where they are. Just
And they
take
did.
their picks. And they did. And I'm pleased with the picks that they made. One of the things that I was really glad to see is I saw all the interviews with the draft picks, and there was a very common denominator. They all seemed to love football. And I love to see that in players. So I'm looking forward to see how they get assimilated into the process. But beyond that, as far as the quarterback situation is concerned, my attitude is pretty simple. If the Giants traded up to take Drake May, for example, took New England's spot, and they didn't get Malik Neighbors, I don't see how the Giants would have been a better team in 2024 with Drake May as the backup to Daniel Jones and not having a wide receiver that can.
Oh, no, George, make no mistake. If the Giants pick a quarterback, that's not a pick to make you better this year. That's a pick to make you better down the line.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but I don't see sacrificing this year for.
Oh, George, I wasn't advocating for it. I was just explaining to you what the rationale would be.
No, I know you weren't. I'm just stating my own
I got
opinion about that. I'm not criticizing or second guessing or anything like that. I just think that the Giants are going to be better in 2024 taking Malik Neighbors, and down the line too. And when they get their quarterback, they'll get their quarterback. I'm honestly not convinced that Daniel Jones can't be a winning quarterback for the Giants year in and year out. I've never thought that he was going to take the Giants to a Super Bowl. I always thought his ceiling was kind of like that Smith from the 49ers and the Chiefs. But, after seeing the Giants lose for years, I'm satisfied with the Giants being a winning team and maybe making the playoffs, and we'll see how they can make it to the Super Bowl.
Awesome.
But anyway, I just wanted to give you my opinion.
Great.
I'm pleased with what they did, and I think they're going in the right direction. And, again, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you for calling in,
John,
George.
and enjoy your few days off.
I appreciate that. I'll still be here. Make no mistake about it. But I'll be off the show for a couple of days. And I will say this, Matt. He said I think Daniel Jones can be a winning quarterback. Well, he showed 2 years ago that if the situation around him is just tenable, he can be a winning quarterback. I think Super Bowl. Start talking about that. I think the Giants aren't in that position yet. That's not a conversation to have now. But for me, this is probably the best set of talent Jones has had around him, from the offensive line to the receiver position, since he's been here.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, just the receiver position alone, he hasn't really had a star number one wide receiver. Again,
no, Darius Slayton's been his best guy.
Malik Neighbors hasn't played yet, but he clearly was drafted to be that number one guy, the top dog in the wide receiver room. And yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the Joe Schoen has now spent a first, a second, and a third round pick at the wide receiver position in his first 3 drafts. However,
and he's used a first and second round pick on offensive linemen too, by the way.
Yeah. But
and a third.
The first receiver he took, Wan'Dale Robinson, we've still yet to see a full season of him playing healthy.
At full strength. Yep.
At full strength, because he tore his ACL halfway through his rookie year, right as he was starting to what looked like breakout. And then last year he was recovering from the torn ACL. So it wasn't until the last 5-6 weeks of the season that he really started to look like his normal self. And in those last 5 weeks, he looked great. So now they have a wide receiver room with Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton, who has been the most consistent guy probably on the entire team since he arrived here in 2019. And then you also have like Isaiah Hodgins. Isaiah Hodgins seems to be now like the 5th receiver on the team.
And you hope Darren Waller is back for one more year,
yes,
which would help.
Yes. But all this talk about him possibly retiring, the Giants want as many talented players on the team as they can possibly get. And Darren Waller, injury, concerns aside, is still a talented player and would be one of the best pass catchers on the team if he decides to return, for sure.
201-939-4513. You want season ticket, folks? Go to Giants.com/tickets. It's an opportunity to become a fandom to the next level. Get a season ticket membership to get connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2024 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit Giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. And while you're online, folks, go check out Giants TV. It's the Giants' official connected TV streaming app. It brings original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV is free on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and all your smart TVs. And, of course, you can find all those Giants videos on the Giants mobile app and the Giants YouTube channel. Go subscribe to that as well. The video of all our programs can also be found there. 201-939-4513. Donnie in Queens. Donnie, you're up next.
Gentlemen, good afternoon. How we doing?
We're good.
Good.
I was in the quarterback camp. I wanted to walk out of the draft with a QB. I would have taken McCarthy at 6, but I also acknowledge I don't actually scout these players. I mean, I watched some highlight tapes. I listened to pundits and analysts who were very torn on the player, kind of to begin with. So, if they didn't go in that direction, it is what it is, right? We'll wait for the future. I thought the draft fell good for the Giants, perhaps outside of round 2. That run on D tackles and corners right before them was pretty painful to watch. Jackson Powers Johnson too. I think he went 44 to the Raiders. Those are some tough things.
Yeah, Donnie, I'm with you. I didn't feel like in round 2, or frankly even in round 3, I always, and this happened with Xavier McKinney a few years ago, I like to have that one guy sitting there that just seems like a sore thumb, and it's like, why is he still there? And boy, I would have picked him at the end of the first round. I didn't get the sense that type of player was there in round 2 or round 3 where you're just like jumping out of your seat like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's there. We have to get that guy.
Yeah, those guys went off the board like right ahead of them.
And by the way, Donnie, that's why it killed me to trade away that pick at 39 because you could have gotten one of those guys there. But I'm not complaining about Brian Burns. It was a good trade, right. But that's why not having that pick at 39 is so painful because that's a spot where maybe one of those, first-round grade guys still could have been sitting there.
Correct. And I guess my real disappointment with the Newman pick, again, has nothing to do with the player. By all accounts, good player. I hate to admit it, I bet on Minnesota a few times this year, so I watched him play, and he's definitely a good player. But to me, just from a roster-building approach, I don't like that over the last 2 off seasons we've let 2 starting safeties go, with Julian and Xavier. Now, you can argue the financial aspects of Xavier, and fine, but Julian certainly is on a very reasonable contract where...
Now, Donnie, remember, the Giants, and this has been confirmed by multiple reports, actually offered Julian Love more money than Seattle did, and his agent screwed that up.
Sure, but, also Xavier now, too, into the mix, where between those 2 guys, they couldn't get a contract on with either of them. And now they basically were put in a spot where now they had a hole at a position where they didn't have one. Like, these guys inherited so few pieces moving forward that when at safety, which to me, is not a premium position, they had bodies there, and they did a great job picking up Pinnock off the Jets practice squad, I believe it was, or he was waived, one of the 2.
Mm-hmm.
To then have to turn around and use the 47th pick on a safety to replace something that was already here rubs me the wrong way a little bit. But other than that, happy that in the 4th and 5th round, I talked to you about this, drafting guys that run, backs, tight ends, even safeties, in those rounds, I feel like you have a shot to get a guy. You start taking defensive tackles and offensive linemen by that round. You're really just kind of hoping and wishing there. So, look, last thing I'll say, Joe made a great point his post-draft presser that, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, there's a nucleus there now, under contract, cost controlled for a few years, that it's starting to build. And I think if they just got a quarterback in the door at some point, I think people will look at the offense a lot differently. So progress is being made. How much, we'll find out in the fall. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Donnie. And remember, too, I get your point on Xavier McKinney. I kept trying to say McKinstry, but I knew that wasn't right because I'm looking at McKinstry in front of me. I'm going to make a point about that in a second. Letting Xavier McKinney go and having to replace him with another second-round pick, but the price point on those 2 players are so much different, which is really the difference there. You're getting one for $14 million left or less or whatever it is. I got to compare what the second-round contract is, but that's the big difference there.
Yeah, if the Giants were, let's say they would have matched that Xavier McKinney contract, I don't know if Brian Burns is a Giant today.
Probably not, no.
I don't know if, John Runyon would have been able to be signed. Like, the whole offseason would have looked a lot differently. So
you would have had to sacrifice something else.
Yes, and a pretty significant something else because, as we said, McKinney got a pretty large contract. But just in terms of Newman himself, I loved this pick. Safety was a pretty, big, neat area of the roster that had to be addressed. I wasn't sure if they were going to choose to address it early in the draft or, as I mentioned before, try to look towards some of the veteran free agents because there are some good veteran free agent safeties out there. They chose to take Newman at 47. And, if you look at Newman's production at Minnesota, this guy was a stud.
12 interceptions in his last 3 years.
He has the school's all-time record for interceptions at the safety position. He was, according to Pro Football Focus, the best safety in coverage, at least of like the Power 5 schools. He had a passer rating and allowed in coverage of 33. Like, this guy was high football IQ. He was brought in, I believe, to sort of be the anchor of the secondary. I mean, Deonte Banks obviously was taken last year to be the number one cornerback, and he already served that role last year, matching up against the opposing team's leading receivers. But they needed, I would call it like a glue guy in the back end that will bring the entire secondary together, and they have that in Nubin.
Yeah, and I think if you look at where his deficiencies are, and really the only thing when you watch his game that you worry about is the overall elite athleticism factor, and you look at his testing was fine. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't elite, right? And I think you see on tape that, all right, running really fast in a straight line, maybe there are other safeties that were available that might be a little faster than him. But remember, the Giants are not going to ask him to play a lot of man-to-man defense. If they do what Shane Bowen's done in the past, they're primarily going to be a zone team. And he's a guy that where the Giants play a lot of split safety, he might not be in single high a ton, where he has to be able to navigate complete sideline to sideline, which, by the way, was his primary job in Minnesota. That's what he did there. That's where he got his interceptions. He was a single high safety there, so he can do that. Don't get me wrong. He can do that. But in the Giants split safety system, it even mitigates maybe that lack of top speed even more, where he's sitting back there worrying about half the field, reading the quarterback. He has more than enough athleticism to handle that part of the job, and he's going to be damn good at it because of his intelligence and his ability to read and react to the quarterback.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. If you just look at his game tape, I mean, you see him just reading the eyes of quarterbacks almost every other play. Like, he has got such a high football IQ. Frankly, so he ran a unofficial 4.74 at his pro day, is what I'm seeing.
I thought it was even better than that, to be honest with you. I will check that. But I thought he was 4.59.
Whatever it was,
I'll check it.
That would be like, that was like the biggest knock against Tyler Nubin, was that his 40 time wasn't great. If he runs a faster 40 time, he would not have been there for the Giants at pick 47.
4.59 unofficial.
4.59 unofficial. Okay. If that number was 4.45 even, I don't think he's making it to pick 47.
He might not.
I really don't think so.
I remember he did not work out at the combine, and he had a knee injury late in the year, which held him out. So maybe he wasn't even at top speed at his pro day, too, which is another thing.
That is a very good point. But this is a guy that is just so good in coverage. It is going to, especially as you mentioned, with Shane Bowen's defense, primarily zone coverage, I think he's going to thrive in this system. I mean, we've seen Shane Bowen have a lot of success with safeties in the past, and I think Nubin is just the next up to potentially grow into a Pro Bowl caliber safety.
And I've said this, and I'm sorry for jumping on you. No. I've said this before. Tight end's a position where you bet on traits, right? That's a position where what you're being asked to do is so much different from school to school. When you have a guy coming out and he tests really well, you bet on their traits. How do you think the Niners found George Kittle, right? You bet on traits, and you hope that you can develop the player into a player that can produce to match those traits, right? Safety's never been that. Safety is not generally a traits position. You go back, you look at Justin Simmons. In fact, I'll bring it up right now. I'll tell you what Justin Simmons did in terms of athleticism. And it's not something that generally is a guide to who's going to be the best safeties. Justin Simmons ran a 4.61. Newman ran a 4.59, right? Now, some of his other athletic numbers were better, but an even better example, because this happened just a couple years ago, and we actually talked about this a lot on our shows because I think some Giant fans were interested in maybe picking him as a player. But, Kyle Hamilton did not run well either. Kyle Hamilton ran a 4.59, same exact number as Tyler Nubin. His shuttle and three-cone numbers were about the same as what Tyler Nubin was. So not much separating them there. His jumps were a little bit better, but the point I'm trying to make is that the athleticism for safeties, I think, is less important than what's going on in your head and your ability to think and see, anticipate, tackle, and do the types of things Nubin is good at, as opposed to some other positions where corner testing is really important. Wide receiver, I think testing is very important. Yep. Maybe not as important as the other ones, but so you kind of have to take all that with a little bit of a grain of salt.
It's funny you bring up Simmons because that, at least from what I've seen, was probably the most popular pro comparison for Tyler Newman was Justin Simmons. And I don't know if anyone out there would say that they wouldn't sign up for a player of Justin Simmons' caliber on a rookie contract.
Yeah, exactly. David in North Carolina is up next. Hey, David.
Hey, good afternoon, guys. How you doing?
What up?
Good. How are you?
Kind of piggyback off the last caller a little bit. It'd been great to kind of lock down a potential starting number 2 corner, I guess, opposite of Banks. But as you guys just rattled off there, it's really hard to complain with the type of player that at least Ruben projects to be. I think we definitely needed a starting caliber safety, and now it's obviously that number 2 corner and probably some more bodies in general at corner. Linebacker depth and D-line depth are probably the most glaring needs. But the one thing I wanted to comment on it now that the draft's over that just irritates me to no end during this whole process is I know in a perfect world and scenario, and as Giants fans, we would all love to know that, or potentially know that we've got that, Eli Manning clone or type guy that's sitting there that's going to be a, Hall of Fame quarterback, the type of quarterback that every franchise is looking for that, technically, quotation marks, is going to lead you to a 9-10 win season every year, even if the talent around them isn't great. But why, even with the evaluators on TV and the analysts and everything, when in reality, an NFL player, their career is 5-6 years, tops, and I'm probably stretching it at that. Like, there's a laundry list of quarterbacks that weren't the greatest quarterbacks that got their teams to Super Bowls or won Super Bowls. I mean,
yeah, you know what though? Not you know what? I'm David. I'm going to introduce you interrupt you real quick. Maybe in the past, not anymore. Like, it just doesn't happen very often.
I agree. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I said, the perfect scenario, the ball carrier guy, the franchise guy, I get it. But every team is looking for that. And so there's only so many of those guys walking the planet. And we see year after year that teams reach. I mean, it's obvious they reach to try to get that guy. And to your point, it doesn't happen as much, but especially nowadays. But I mean, Nick Foles won a Super Bowl.
He did, but in fairness, during that playoff run, Nick Foles actually played like a superstar quarterback during that playoff run. If you look at 2 or 3 of those games, he was a machine in those games.
But I mean, in terms of just being a successful franchise that gives you a chance, like, no knock on Jalen Hurts. I don't think Jalen Hurts is the greatest at quarterbacking, but he's a great athlete, and they run that, zone read system well. Like, you can win without the greatest thrower of the football, the greatest quarterback. Does it mean it's going to give you the best odds at a Lombardi Trophy? Absolutely not. Do we know if Daniel Jones is that guy? Absolutely not. But, I mean, how can you be wrong not taking a guy like Malik Neighbors and passing on J.J. McCarthy when there's so limited film that tells you what this guy can do, and you're just thinking, and you hear person after person on TV, I just can't believe they're not preparing for the future to draft J.J. McCarthy and get that cornerstone in place so that they can then build around him. I mean, when that's such an unknown, like, I mean, I can't argue your point. I grew up in the 80s. I seen the Redskins win with a multitude of guys. Jeff Hostetler, God bless him, but when he left the Giants, he wasn't the best.
Yeah, Trent Dilfer. You want to go back to Trent Dilfer? Matt Hasselbeck made a Super Bowl. I mean, Jake Delhomme made a Super Bowl. Brad Johnson made a Super Bowl. Like, you can go through those guys. But again, that's 20 years ago. If you look since 2000, I literally made this list for either the Fact or Fiction or Cover 4 that we did 2 weeks ago. I forget what it was. So these are the guys these are the guys. You have Foles, who again played like a superstar quarterback in the playoffs, but Foles is one. The dilapidated version of Peyton Manning that got the Broncos to their Super Bowl with their great defense, where it's Peyton Manning, but it really wasn't Peyton Manning, right? You had Joe Flacco,
Right, absolutely.
who again he's the guy that got really hot that year and was flying in the playoffs, played really well, but he'd be in that category. And that's pretty much the end of the list. You know, the next two worst guys are like Russell Wilson and Eli Manning since 2007. And that's kind of your list. So those guys are both going to be Hall of Famers. So is Peyton Manning, by the way. So you're basically looking at two quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls since 2007 that are not going to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
And I agree, but when you, I guess my point is, you as a GM, as a team owner, you got to start somewhere. You can't just throw up your hands and say, hey, you know what? We don't have a franchise quarterback.
Well, David, and you're right. I think your point that you should focus on when you talk to your friends about this and you get annoyed at them is that if you don't think one of the quarterbacks there is going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback, you don't pick them just for the sake of picking one.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point you're making, and I think that's the right way to look at it, which is what every team evaluates when it comes to these quarterbacks.
I mean, I think Brody has played his butt off, but even him, I'm still not sold that he's an elite quarterback. When I watch,
that's fair.
I just don't see the arm talent that, and yet they've made it with Jimmy G and him. Now, granted, they didn't bring the Lombardi home, and that very well could be that trait that we can't define, that franchise quarterback trait.
Well, it also makes it easier, Dave. It makes it easier, too, when that guy, even if he's not, one of these superstars you're talking about, if they're on a rookie contract, it's easier to build around that, let's say, B-plus quarterback, right? When he's on the rookie contract. Sure. Because much like the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts, right? It was before they signed to that big contract. They have the best offensive line. They have great wide receivers. They have a good defense. Same thing with the 49ers, right? So I think the question you eventually get down to is once you pay that non-A-plus quarterback, then can you put enough around them to get to a Super Bowl? You know what I mean?
And I agree. And then I think that's, kind of how we get back to Daniel Jones. Listen, I mean, by all accounts, this is his kind of make-it-or-break-it year. Yeah, it was a 4-year deal. But we've stated on this show many times, Giants can get out relatively easy after this year. So, I mean, it's not like the guy signed to a 12-year deal. I mean, that's fully guaranteed. Like, this is make or break, and if he doesn't show some improvement, we'll move on to the next guy. I mean, Kerry Collins wasn't a perfect quarterback, but you know what? There was talent around him, and it was a heck of a lot better than the Dave Brown, Danny Cannell, Kent Graham years. I can tell you that. So, let's see what happens. This is make or break for Danny, and if he doesn't get it done, we'll move on to somebody else. But I am so glad they did not reach and just take a quarterback for taking one.
Thank you, David.
If you want to have that mentality. Yep, thanks, guys.
Appreciate the call, man. Hey, look, I joked over the weekend. This is not the most important year of Daniel Jones' career. He already had that year.
Yep.
That was 2 years ago, and then he got his contract. But you can put this at number 2 if you want. That's fine. You can have that conversation. And you hope that you've put enough around him where he can be a successful quarterback the same way he was 2 years ago. And that's what you hope you're going to get into this year. And as Joe Shane said to me at the Combine when he was on with us, and I asked him about, I basically said, should you always be hunting for that superstar quarterback? That was my question. He goes, yeah, but there's only so many of those guys. And that's the point. You have to do your best with what's available to you. And 2 years ago, or I guess last offseason, not even 1 year ago, when they saw Daniel Jones to that contract, you looked around. You could have franchised him, sure, but then you get into the whole Saquon thing. Do you bring him back? And that creates that whole issue. We don't have to relitigate that. But the question is, at that point, what was your better option coming off of a playoff year? So, yes, you always want to find that next, Eli Manning 20-year quarterback. But if you can't find that guy, you can't get access to that player, you get the best player you can. And Daniel Jones is a guy that won a playoff game 2 years ago, and we've seen when things around him are okay that he can be a winning NFL quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Shane mentioned this in the press conference with Dable Saturday evening, in that they've been doing their work on the quarterbacks in the draft every year since they got here. This year, this offseason, it was probably the most public, or at least the reports out there were the most public knowledge. But he said that they've been doing extensive research and homework on all the quarterbacks in the 2 previous drafts.
Like C.J. Stroud last year, he gave as an example.
Exactly. So it's not like this is the first time they've, ever really considered drafting a quarterback in the first round or whatever round. Like, they've been putting the work in, and if there was a guy in the previous 2 years on the board at one of their picks that they thought this guy is going to be our franchise quarterback, they would have taken him. So it's not the first time this offseason that they've, done a lot of research or a lot of time spent researching the quarterback position. And just in terms of Daniel Jones, 2 years ago was probably his best season, and it came when his back was up against the wall. You can make an argument that his back is somewhat, at least, up against the wall again heading into this year. Maybe we'll see the best version of Daniel Jones this season, as you mentioned.
And hopefully Andrew Thomas stays healthy.
Yes, as you mentioned, this is the most talent he's had around him. I mean, last year, Andrew Thomas gets hurt. The best offensive lineman gets hurt the first series of the first game and was out for half the season. That kind of immediately put a torpedo into the Giants, at least into the offense.
Yeah.
So if Thomas, if everyone else can stay healthy, including Daniel himself, maybe we'll see the best version of him this year. Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's everyone's hope. Let's go to Cliff in New York. Cliff, what's up?
Hey, guys. Thanks for everything. I don't know if you covered this in the first couple of minutes, but how do you did all this work on these players coming out for the draft, and you're watching all of these corners go one after the other in the second round, and then we end up with Drew Phillips in the third round. My question is, how do you describe the drop-off, if there is one, that we got Drew? Is he somebody that can only play the slot? It doesn't seem that way. Is there really that big a difference? I mean, you had guys ranked on your own board. I think you said there were 5 elite corners.
Once you got past Cooper DeJean and Kool-Aid McKinstry, and I said this throughout the process, ordering the cornerbacks for me in rounds 2 and 3 were very difficult. I had a hard time doing it. Cliff, I didn't think there was that much separating them. For example, I had Andrew Phillips ranked ahead of Kamari Lassiter, who got picked 42nd overall. I had Max Melton a few spots above Andrew Phillips, so they were roughly the same. Mike Sanders still I happen to like, but again, he's another slot-only guy. Rackstraw, they're all kind of in that same range in, mid second round to early third round. So I didn't have a ton of separation within that group.
Okay, I take that as good news. And you just mentioned 2 names that were at the top after you got past them?
Yeah, well, I thought Cooper DeJean and McKinstry both could have been first-round picks.
Yeah. All right, well, that's good news. On the offensive line, the striking thing about, I was looking for a guard. I'll tell you why. The offense, the striking thing about the free agent signings is how many games each of those guys has played the last few years. It seems like all of them played 15 or close to it. And that, to me, was the key. These guys are durable at the NFL level, proven. And that gives us a real shot to have a consistent group. And the only thing that might undermine us is if we have to play the elite defenses in the first few games while these guys get some in-game experience. But to get to the next level where we really compete with Dallas and Philly for a title in the division, I've assumed that we need an elite guard because it seems like they have 2 out of 3 inside guys on the OL that are elite or close to it, and 1 elite tackle. You don't need 5 elite guys, but it seems like you need 3 and 2 of them in the middle. That's been my assumption.
I think the Giants need to develop one more high-level offensive lineman, whether that's at center or guard or right tackle. I think, you have your Andrew Thomas is there, but you don't have your second guy there yet.
Yes, and you think 2 is enough? Because I think the second guy is 1.5 right now with John Michael.
Well, I mean, John Michael Schmitz isn't there yet. I mean, coming off a rookie year, he needs to play better.
I'm saying he's halfway there.
All right, that's fine. I would say if you have 2 really, really good players and then 3 average guys on the offensive line, I think you're fine.
Yeah, agreed.
You're fine.
Well, that's good news too. Well, then it's on him to rise to the level of the second round pick. Was there that big of a difference between him and the guy that the Ravens got in that same draft?
Linderbaum?
Yeah.
Linderbaum played that was 2 years ago. That was the year before John Michael Schmidt. So he's a better player than John Michael is right now, but it makes sense. He's been in the league a year longer. So
he can get to that level, you think?
I mean, sure he can, but we got to see it.
I think
Yeah.
Carmen Brasillo, I think, is going to be a huge boost to everyone in the offensive line room. I mean, that was, going into the offseason, we all said that was the most important hire in terms of, or right up there with defense coordinator, the most important hire on the coaching staff that the Giants were going to make. And all the reviews that we've seen, we've heard about Carmen Brasillo have been nothing but raves about him.
Then again, we haven't actually seen him on the field of players yet.
Of course, but he does have a track record of
yes, he does.
Developing players, guys that, sort of came out of nowhere, quote unquote.
Getting the most out of a player's talent.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you look at the Raiders offensive line the last couple of years, and we've spoken about this. It's not like they put a ton of resources towards the offensive line in terms of high free agent signings or high draft picks. There are some, but Brasillo really got the most out of players that you wouldn't necessarily expect to step up and be very good offensive linemen. But he got the best out of them, and it's clearly what the Giants are hoping he can do again this year with both the young guys, the free agent signings, the veteran guys, everyone. We need the unit to come together, and I think Brasillo is a great guy to be leading the whole group of them.
All right, let's wrap it up today with Bob Malone. Bob, we're a little bit over here, so get to your point quick, all right? And then we'll answer it the best we can.
Okay. The other day I was on the line with you guys, and I was a proponent for J.J. McCarthy.
Yep.
When he was sitting there at number 6, I was thinking about what is the problem here. Joe Shane gave Daniel Jones a 4-year contract when he could have just designated him for 1 year. So this year, what would you think Daniel Jones would be making against the cap if the Giants would have signed him this year, coming off last year?
So if they would have franchise tagged him last year and then he would have been a free agent again this year?
Sure. And then we wouldn't be in cap hell.
I mean,
what do you think Daniel Jones would have signed with the Giants this year?
Coming off that injury contract, it would have been much less.
Right.
It would have been much less. But there is also no way to predict that that's what happened.
It would have been, if they signed him at all, it would have been a hell of a lot less. They could have grabbed a wide receiver. They could have grabbed another offensive lineman because they haven't fixed that problem yet. So Joe,
you also wouldn't have had Saquon Barkley last year, and you wouldn't have had Bobby Okereke last year.
No, I'm saying this year.
No. I'm saying if you would have franchise tagged Daniel the year before, his cap number would have went up by about $20-something million, and you wouldn't have had Saquon Barkley, and you wouldn't have had Bobby Okereke.
Okay. The quarterback position has to be taken care of. So if you don't franchise Daniel Jones, you're giving him $40 million for that 1 year. He gets injured. Now this year, we would have got him for a bag of donuts because he's coming off the injury, and that's if we signed him at all. Because at number 6, we were taking J.J. McCarthy, no matter what.
Okay, and then you wouldn't have Malik Neighbors.
Because Joe Shane made the mistake by giving Daniel Jones that contract, which none of us saw coming, because he had one good game against Minnesota, and then the real Jones came out the next week, and you saw what he was all about. I think Shane put us in such... He was hired to take care of the cap. He said, I'm going to get the cap under control, and I'm going to fix the offensive line. I'm going to see what kind of quarterback.
Bob, the contract was literally designed so they could get out after 2 years.
Yeah, with a $22 million cap hit. What good is that?
But Bob, you understand. By not franchising him, you save a lot of money on the first year of the contract. On the second year of the contract, you pay the... Will you let me finish, Bob? On the second year of the contract, you pay the piper on it. So you're making a calculation there.
You're not going to sign him this year.
Bob, you don't... Thanks for the call. You don't know that at the time. Obviously, if you go back and you tell Joe Shane that Daniel Jones is going to suffer 2 really serious injuries and that last season goes the way it does, do you probably recalculate what you do? Yeah, maybe you do. I don't know the answer to that. I don't have a time machine. But here's the beauty of it. Neither does Joe Shane. Neither do fans. Neither does Brian Dable. It's an idiotic, looking back with information you didn't have then type of conversation. And the point we made all along, Matt, is that if you do the franchise tag with Jones that year, you pay the price in other areas because his contract number goes up 20 plus, almost $30 million. Guys, he had a $1 million base salary in his rookie year. You put the signing bonus in there, it's still $20 million less than what it was if he would have been franchise tagged. That's money that went to Saquon. That's money that went to Bobby Okereke. And I know it's easy for fans to say this. When you're coming off a playoff year and you're trying to build on that, you don't want to just start ejecting your best players and purposely get worse. That's a very difficult thing to do for an ownership group that had been, frankly, waiting a long time for the team to get back to the postseason since 2016. So we talked about it all year that year. And when we were at the Combine that year, you said no one expected Daniel Jones to get that contract. I sat at the Combine with Paul Dottino. We interviewed Joe Corey, who's a former NFL agent, and he comes on with us every year around the Combine. He did it again this year, and he laid down the type of contract he thought Daniel Jones would get. This was at the Combine, again, 3 weeks before he got the actual contract. It matched almost identically with the contract the Giants ended up giving him.
Yeah, I feel like there were a lot of reports that he was going to get around that number. So it definitely was not out of the blue by any means.
Yeah.
I agree with you. There's no point in, saying shoulda, coulda, woulda about decisions that were made a year ago. What's done is done. All you can do is move forward with the team that you have and the resources that you have. And the caller brought up, J.J. McCarthy in particular. As we've talked about, the front office and the coaching staff did extensive homework on all of the quarterbacks.
They were open to the proposition.
Yeah, they were certainly open to it. They, put some guys through workouts, met privately with all of these guys, reportedly met privately with all of these top guys.
30 visits, all that.
The whole shebang. Like, if they thought that J.J. McCarthy was going to be the guy that could take them to where they want this football program to be in the coming years, he would have been the pick at 6, and there would have been no hesitation about it.
And it would have had nothing to do with whether or not they gave Daniel Jones that contract 2 years ago. 0.0.
Yes. As Joe has said multiple times in the offseason leading up to the draft, that contract was not going to be a factor in terms of whether or not they drafted a quarterback. And
the team, by the way, is not in salary cap hell, guys.
No, by no means in salary cap hell.
Pearson, I know we got to go. I want to look up one thing.
I agree
just to give fans this,
I agree
this
that if the Giants decide to move on from Daniel Jones next year, having a $22 million cap hit, it's not the most ideal thing. But all things considered, considering the contract that he signed in the first place, that's really not that bad at all to get out of it after 2 years if they choose to.
Right now, and this is off of Spot Track, I'm trying to figure out how much cap space the Giants are supposed to have next year. The Giants are on pace to have almost $50 million of cap space next year. And that's before if they decide whatever they do with Daniel. So they're going to have plenty of money to spend next year in free agency if they want.
And
plenty of money.
And who knows how much the cap is going to go up. I mean, the cap ended up going up more this offseason than anyone was expecting. And, I mean, Joe even talked about how they had, almost, what was it, $10 million more than they were expecting to have in cap space. Who knows? The same could happen next year. So the Giants could be looking at a whole bunch of cap space next offseason. And that, again, as you said, before even making any decisions on Daniel.
And that's while having 3 core 25-year-old, 26-year-old players under contract long-term with Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Andrew Thomas.
Yeah, so the salary cap hell argument, that I don't understand.
And would any dead money, do you want to have dead money? No.
Of course
but given the size of the cap, if it's less than 10% of what the salary cap's going to be, that's not something that cripples you.
Yeah.
It's just not. Just look around the league. It's just not something that cripples you.
Yep.
The Cowboys are thinking, Dak Prescott $40 million next year, whether he's on the team or not.
Crazy.
He's not going to be on the roster. Thanks for being with us, everybody. We enjoyed having a conversation with you today on Big Blue Kickoff Live. For Matt Citak, I'm John Schmeelk, brought to you by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. We'll see you next time.